If you've ever seen a private security officer carrying a firearm, you probably, picture maybe a local mall cop, someone who did a quick weekend course.
Yeah, that image,
Yeah.
that's often pretty far off the mark,
Hmm.
especially when you look at certain places like, say, Florida.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing today. We are diving deep into the official firearms training manual and student handbook for Class G statewide firearm license holders in Florida.
Right, these are your armed private security officers and private investigators.
And if you're thinking this is just some basic safety rundown, well, you're missing a really crucial piece.
Hmm.
The initial requirement. It's a pretty rigorous 28 hours of instruction, and it's broken down into very specific legal and practical parts.
Yeah, it's not just range time.
No. So our mission today is really to pull out the core legal framework, the safety protocols, which are demanding, and the intense performance standards these folks have to meet just to hold that license.
And here's where it gets really interesting and kind of the whole point of this deep dive. The Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, FDACS, they published this manual, and they state, like explicitly,
Yeah.
that these training standards, they come directly from the Florida Basic Recruit Training Program's High Liability course, the one used by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE.
Okay, wait. Let's just pause on that. So FDLE, that's the State Police Academy standard, right?
Pretty much, yeah. It's the benchmark.
So what you're saying is the standard for armed private security is literally the same benchmark of excellence used to train actual sworn law enforcement recruits in Florida.
That's exactly what the manual says. This isn't just, basic civilian self-defense training plus. Oh, this is the professional gold standard for using firearms, but applied to the private sector.
Wow. Okay, that sets a massive standard then for getting in and for staying qualified. And it definitely changes the legal expectations, I imagine.
Absolutely. It raises the bar significantly. So maybe we should start with the basics, like the architecture of the license itself.
Yeah, let's do that. The Class G license requirements. You mentioned it's called a companion license. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means it can't exist on its own. The G license has to be attached, essentially, to another license they hold.
Like what?
Usually it's a Class D security officer license,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe a private investigator license, a PI license. Could also be an intern PI or a manager's license in those fields.
Okay.
So the authority to carry that firearm, it's strictly tied to when they're performing their regulated duties under that main license.
Ah, so you can't just get a Class G and carry your weapon around off-duty for personal protection.
Nope, not legally under this license anyway. It's only valid when you're on the clock, basically,
Yeah.
working within the scope of your security or investigator job.
Got it. Okay, so that 28-hour initial course, it sounds intense. How's that time actually broken down? What do they have to learn?
The manual is super specific.
Yeah.
7 hours, a full 7 hours have to be on the legal aspects of using firearms.
7 hours just on law. Wow.
Yeah. Then 10 hours for familiarization and marksmanship. The theory, the basics of shooting.
Right.
And 6 hours are specifically for practical exercises and live fire on the range.
And the rest.
The remaining hours cover things like safety rules in detail,
Hmm.
weapon maintenance, cleaning, administrative stuff, procedures.
That 7 hours on law really jumps out, especially thinking about the use of force stuff we'll probably get into later.
Oh, absolutely. It's foundational.
And what about testing? They have to prove they actually learn this stuff, right? 2 different ways.
Correct. 2 hurdles. First, they need at least 70% on a written exam. That covers all the classroom material, especially the legal parts.
Okay, 70%. Makes sense.
But maybe even more importantly, they also have to show 70% proficiency on the actual basic firearms course of fire, the shooting test.
Ah, so you could ace the test but fail the shooting or vice versa, and you're out.
Exactly. Fail either one, and you don't get the license. No qualification.
Okay, let's talk about the range then. For qualifying with a handgun, let's say a typical semi-automatic pistol or maybe a revolver, what's the actual round count? How much shooting do they have to do?
It's standardized. The course requires 3 full cycles of fire. Each cycle uses 48 rounds.
48 rounds per cycle.
Yep, so 3 times 48, that's 144 rounds total. That's the minimum mandated ammunition they have to shoot accurately to pass that initial course.
144 rounds. And is that all just one test or?
Typically, the way it's run is one cycle is practice, lets you warm up, get your sights dialed in. Then you have 2 cycles that count for qualification.
Okay, so they get a practice run.
Right. But that 144 round baseline, it's consistent. The idea is to really hammer home the muscle memory, the skills, right from the start.
But it doesn't stop there, does it? The license is usually good for, what, 2 years? What happens after year one?
Yeah, proficiency fades, right? So annual requalification is absolutely mandatory.
Every single year.
Every 12 months, tied to the license's anniversary date. They have to complete a minimum of 4 hours of continuation training, and they have to report it.
And does that 4 hours include more shooting?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
It includes another full 144-round course of fire, 3 strings of 48 rounds again.
wow, so they have to shoot that 144-round course every single year to keep the license?
That's the standard. They want to make sure those skills don't degrade, combat that skill fade, as they say.
That makes sense. What if someone qualifies with, say, a 9mm pistol, but then later they decide they want to carry a .45 ACP on duty, or switch from a semi-auto to a revolver?
Can't just do it. That requires a specific, separate 4-hour transition course for that new type and caliber of weapon.
Ah, okay.
The rule is ironclad. You can only carry the specific firearm type and caliber you've actually qualified with.
So that stops someone from qualifying on an easy-to-shoot gun, like a .38 special maybe?
Right.
And then immediately strapping on some big high-caliber weapon they've never actually been tested on for duty.
Exactly. It ensures proven competence with the actual weapon being carried.
Speaking of carrying, we usually see security guards carrying openly. Is that always the case, or are there exceptions for concealed carry?
Generally, yes, the weapon has to be encased and in view.
Yeah.
That's kind of Florida's standard for open carry for security.
Okay.
But there are specific exceptions. Private investigators, PIs, and also PI interns, they are allowed to carry concealed.
Right, that makes sense for their line of work.
It does. And there's another one, Class D security officers with the G license who are doing specific limited special assignment duties.
What does that mean, special assignment? Like executive protection?
Could be, yeah. The manual says assignments that need discretion, where openly displaying a gun would actually hinder the job.
Mm-hmm.
Think maybe undercover store security, things like that. But it implies these are specific, likely pre-approved situations.
Got it. Now, the manual lists very specific handgun calibers they can carry. It's not just any gun. Why so restrictive?
Yeah, the list is .38 special, .380 auto, 9mm semi-auto, .40 caliber Smith & Wesson, and .45 ACP.
Pretty standard duty calibers.
Mostly. And the goal is standardization, reliability, predictable ballistic performance. What's interesting is the rule about the .357 Magnum revolver.
What about it?
If you qualify with and carry a .357 revolver, you can only use .38 special ammunition in it for duty.
So no powerful .357 Magnum rounds on the job.
Correct. Only the less powerful .38 special. It seems like a deliberate choice to balance stopping power with maybe reducing the risk of overpenetration in civilian areas.
That's a subtle but significant restriction. And how many guns can they carry at once?
The maximum of 2 firearms on their person while on duty. No more than 2.
Okay. Now, the rules on ammunition type, that seems even stricter. Rule 5N 1.129. It goes way beyond just caliber.
Oh, absolutely critical. This is about duty ammo, liability. The rule outright prohibits several kinds of, let's call them exotic or high-risk rounds. Things like laser safety slugs or any pre-fragmented bullets. Exploding bullets, obviously. Teflon-coated, armor-piercing rounds. Those are all out.
Why ban those?
Generally, they're seen as increasing liability. Specialized rounds may be not suited for typical security work where bystanders are a major concern. Plus, armor-piercing ammo raises obvious issues.
And there's a surprising ban on hand-loaded or reloaded ammunition for duty carry.
Yeah, that's a big one. Reloads are strictly forbidden for duty. You can use them on the range for practice, maybe save some money,
Sure.
but for carrying on the job. Factory ammunition only.
What's the reasoning there? Reliability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Factory ammo goes through rigorous quality control. Reloads, unless done absolutely perfectly, just introduce a higher chance of a misfire, a squib load, or inconsistent power. When things go sideways, you need ammo you can absolutely count on.
Makes sense. The rule also mentions restrictions on wad cutter billets.
Right. Full wad cutters, those flat-nosed bullets you use for punching clean holes in paper targets, they're also restricted to range use only, not suitable for duty.
And one little detail about full metal jacket, FMJ, ammo.
Yes. FMJ, or full metal case, is restricted to use only in semi-automatic pistols,
Why only semi-autos?
likely due to penetration concerns.
Yeah.
FMJ rounds tend to penetrate more deeply than hollow points. So in a revolver, the standard choice would typically be a hollow point anyway, for better expansion and reduced risk of passing through the target and hitting something else. Semi-autos might need FMJ for reliable feeding sometimes, so it's allowed there, but not necessarily the default choice for revolvers.
Okay, let's shift to the worst case scenario. An officer actually fires their weapon on duty. Even if they don't hit anyone, maybe it's an accidental discharge or even a warning shot. What happens next?
Accountability kicks in immediately. Any discharge during regulated duties requires filing a specific form. The Firearms Incident Report, FDACS 16001,
And that goes to?
to the Division of Licensing. They oversee the program.
What does the report need to include?
A full rundown, the nature of the incident, why they felt it was necessary to fire the weapon, and copies of any police reports related to that incident.
So, every single shot fired professionally gets documented and reviewed by the state licensing body.
That's the system. Strict oversight.
Okay, so when that firearm is discharged, especially if it involves another person, the officer is immediately in a really tough spot legally. They're facing threats from two sides, right? Criminal and civil.
Absolutely. A legal firestorm is a good way to put it. Let's start with criminal liability. That's the big one, obviously.
Yeah, jail time, fines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Violating state or federal criminal law. The training really hammers the Florida state laws, chapters 776 and 782, the use of force statutes.
And the key message for the officers is?
You are not immune, period. If the use of deadly force is found to be unjustified, meaning they acted recklessly, negligently, or just plain outside what the law allows, they can face serious charges. Manslaughter, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, even murder.
Just like any other citizen who uses force unlawfully.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The license gives them no shield from criminal prosecution if they misuse that authority.
Okay, then there's the other side. Civil liability. Tort law. This is where lawsuits and big money damages come in.
Right. This usually comes down to failing to meet the accepted standard of care for a security officer or investigator in that situation.
Standard of care. How is that defined?
It boils down to negligence, usually. And negligence requires proving 4 things in court.
Okay, what are they?
First, the plaintiff has to show the officer had a duty to act with reasonable care. That's usually established by the job itself.
Right.
Second, they breached that duty, did something wrong, like firing when they shouldn't have, or maybe failing to act when they should have.
Okay.
Third, that breach must be the proximate cause, the direct link to the injury that happened.
The but-for test, kind of.
Sort of, yeah. And fourth, the plaintiff has to show they suffered actual injury or damages that can be compensated, usually with money.
Now, that standard of care, this is tricky. They have FDLE level training, but you said they have private citizen authority. So how does a jury judge them like a cop or like a regular person?
That is the absolute tightrope they walk. The training equips them to a high standard, right?
Yeah.
But legally, they're generally judged by the standard of a reasonable and prudent person acting in the specific role of a trained, licensed security officer or PI.
So it's higher than just any random person off the street.
Probably, yes.
Yeah.
Because they are trained. The jury expects more competence.
But they don't get the same legal protections or immunities a sworn police officer might have.
Generally, no. They don't have those specific statutory immunities. So the manual points out the 2 biggest danger zones for civil suits. Negligent use of deadly force, where they created an unnecessary risk, and intentional use of excessive force, using more force than was justified.
You mentioned creating undue risk. What about warning shots? It seems like something someone might try, fire in the air, scare someone off without shooting at them.
Yeah, it seems like a middle ground, but the training manual is crystal clear. Warning shots are incredibly dangerous and legally very, very risky.
Why is that?
Because legally, firing a warning shot is defined as the threatened use of deadly force.
Ah, okay. So you can only fire a warning shot if you'd already be justified in actually shooting the person.
Exactly. If the situation hasn't risen to that level, the warning shot itself is already excessive force.
And even if it is justified, there are other risks.
Huge risks. You lose control of that bullet the moment it leaves the barrel. Where does it land? Does it ricochet? Could it hit an innocent bystander blocks away or even farther?
Right. Gravity always wins.
Always. So warning shots are just prime examples for negligence lawsuits or even criminal charges if someone gets hurt. Too much risk, too little control.
Makes perfect sense. So the actual definition of deadly force itself must be super precise then.
It is. It's defined as any force that a reasonable person would think is likely to cause death or serious bodily harm.
And that includes more than just hitting someone.
Definitely. The manual explicitly states it includes firing a gun in the direction of a person, even if you miss. And it absolutely includes firing at an occupied vehicle. Pull the trigger in those situations. You've used deadly force in the eyes of the law.
Okay. Now, the absolute bedrock here, the authority to use that force. You stressed this before, despite the high-level training, their legal authority is limited.
This is probably the single most critical point and the biggest source of trouble. Security officers, PIs, they have the exact same legal right to use physical force, including deadly force, as any private citizen in Florida, period.
Wow. Same as any citizen.
Yes, based on chapters 776 and 782 of the Florida statutes. They have zero enhanced legal authority over a regular person defending themselves or stopping a crime under those laws.
So wait a minute. If their training is at this FDLE standard, but their legal authority is just citizen standard, isn't that setting them up? How do they even operate?
That's the paradox, right? The training isn't meant to give them more authority. It's meant to give them the discipline and restraint to use the limited authority they do have correctly and safely.
Oh, okay.
Since they lack police powers and immunities, their actions have to be even more clearly justified under those private citizen statutes. They need to know those laws inside and out.
And those statutes for deadly force, they only allow it in very specific situations. You said two.
Correct. Only two scenarios justify a private citizen, and therefore these officers using deadly force. First, to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to themselves or another person.
Imminent meaning right now, about to happen.
Exactly. Not maybe later, not yesterday.
Yeah.
Right now. Second, to prevent the imminent commission of a forcible felony.
Okay, forcible felony. That term is doing a lot of work there. What qualifies? It can't be just any felony, right?
Absolutely not. And they need to know this list cold. It's very specific.
Let's hear it.
Okay, the manual lists: treason, murder, manslaughter, sexual battery, carjacking, home invasion robbery, burglary, arson, kidnapping, aggravated assault, aggravated battery, aggravated stalking, aircraft piracy, unlawfully throwing or placing a destructive device or bomb.
That's a lot of serious stuff.
It is, and then there's a catch-all. Any other felony that involves the use or threat of physical force or violence against a person.
So the key is violence or the threat of violence.
Yeah.
What's not on the list is just as important then.
Crucial. Things like simple assault, simple battery, like just getting pushed or punched without a weapon, or serious injury threat, petty theft, trespassing, drug possession. None of those are forcible felonies. You can't use deadly force to stop those.
And that imminent commission rule, it adds another layer. The felony has to be about to happen or happening right now.
Exactly. If the crime is over, even if it was horrific.
Yeah.
Say someone committed a murder, dropped the gun, and is just walking away.
Yeah.
Deadly force is not justified anymore to stop or apprehend them at that point. The imminent threat is gone. Using force then becomes retribution, punishment, not prevention, and that's illegal.
This leads right into the issue of fleeing suspects. Always a tricky area.
And a very clear rule in the training. Generally, you are not authorized to shoot a fleeing suspect. Full stop.
Why? Because they're running away, the imminent threat is usually over.
Precisely. They are moving away from you or the victim. Now, there's a very narrow exception.
Okay.
If the fleeing suspect is still actively trying to kill or cause great bodily harm as they flee, maybe shooting back at you, or if they are escaping after committing a forcible felony and their escape poses an imminent threat of death or serious harm to others,
Yeah.
and you can shoot without being reckless or negligent.
That sounds incredibly specific and hard to judge.
It is, and the negligence part is key. Shooting at a fleeing suspect in a crowded street, even if they just committed a robbery, that's almost certainly reckless because of the danger to bystanders. Big liability.
Okay. And lastly, on the legal side, Florida's Stand Your Ground law. Does that apply to these officers?
Yes, it does. Just like any other citizen. If they are in a place they have a legal right to be, and they aren't engaged in criminal activity themselves, they have no duty to retreat before using justified force, including deadly force.
So if the conditions for deadly force are met, they don't have to try and run away first.
Okay, they can stand their ground, legally.
Okay, so the manual doesn't just teach the law, it makes them apply it through case studies, right? To practice that split-second decision-making.
Exactly. It emphasizes that every situation is unique, depends on the specific facts. Liability hinges on those details.
Let's walk through some of these. Case study, #1. The parking lot fight, you got a verbal argument, it gets physical. A bigger guy starts choking a smaller guy, the officer steps in.
Okay.
The victim gets away, seems safe. But the bigger guy, who seems drunk, now turns on the officer and starts throwing these wild, kind of clumsy punches. Is deadly force okay here?
All right. This is a great example of how threats change. Initially, the chokehold on the first victim. That could potentially be seen as a threat of great bodily harm or death. Justification point number 1 might have been met then.
But the officer stopped that threat.
Right. Intervention successful. Initial threat neutralized. Now, The intoxicated man attacks the officer. But how? With uncoordinated punches.
Which legally is probable.
Simple battery. It hurts, it's illegal, but it's generally not considered likely to cause death or great bodily harm. And crucially, simple battery is not on that list of forcible felonies.
Ah, so even though the officer is being assaulted, the level of threat dropped significantly.
Precisely. The justification for deadly force likely evaporated the moment the threat became just clumsy punches. Using deadly force against simple battery, that's excessive force. Big trouble, criminal and civil.
So the officer has to instantly recognize, okay, this threat went from potentially lethal down to non-lethal, and adjust the response accordingly, even while getting punched.
That's the job. That's the training. Knowing the legal classification of the threat in real time.
Okay, tough one. Let's try case study, #3. Apartment complex. Officer tells an aggressive guy who's banging on doors, yelling, threatening to shoot up the place to leave.
Already sounds bad.
The guy then punches the officer in the face, hard enough to make his knees buckle, draw blood. Then the aggressor rips his shirt open, puts his hands behind his back like he's grabbing something,
Uh-oh.
claims he has a Glock, says he's going to cap the officer, and starts advancing towards him.
Okay, now this scenario stacks up very differently. You have the initial battery, the punch, causing injury. That's serious.
Right.
But the game changer is the verbal threat, I've got a Glock, gonna cap you, combined with the action, simulating, drawing a weapon, and advancing.
That sounds like
Aggravated assault, threatening deadly violence with the apparent ability to carry it out, creating fear. And aggravated assault is explicitly listed as a forcible felony.
So justification met.
It certainly seems so. The officer has experienced a physical attack, heard a direct death threat, seen an action consistent with drawing a gun, and the attacker is advancing. This creates a reasonable belief of imminent death or great bodily harm.
Now, what if the officer shoots and it turns out the guy just had, I don't know, a wallet or a phone behind his back, no actual Glock? Is the shooting still justified?
This is where reasonable belief is absolutely key. If, given everything that happened, the threats, the battery, the gesture, the advance, a reasonable trained officer in that exact moment would have believed a deadly threat was imminent,
Yeah.
then the justification likely holds up. It's based on the perception of the threat at the time the decision was made, not necessarily on what's found out later with hindsight.
That's a critical distinction. Okay, last one. Case study, #5. Shooting into a moving vehicle. Officer sees a hit and run, tries to stop the driver. Driver refuses, drives around the officer.
Like drivers leaving the immediate scene.
Right. But then the officer grabs onto the driver's side window as the car is moving away and fires 4 or 5 shots into the driver's side.
Oof. Yeah, this is almost certainly presented in training as a classic what not to do.
Why?
Because shooting at an occupied vehicle is deadly force. When did the officer shoot? As the car was driving around him and leaving.
Meaning the imminent threat to the officer was?
Over. The car was already past him, departing. Grabbing the window and firing into a fleeing vehicle isn't self-defense at that point. It's an attempt to apprehend or maybe frustration, anger.
And deadly force isn't justified just to stop someone from getting away.
Not unless they pose that ongoing, imminent deadly threat while fleeing, which this scenario doesn't suggest. This is textbook excessive, negligent use of force. Huge liability, likely criminal charges. The hit and run itself might be a felony, but probably not a forcible felony justifying deadly force to stop the flight after the fact.
So the takeaway from these scenarios really seems to be about restraint and instantly assessing when a threat level drops or disappears.
Absolutely. It's less about when to shoot and more about recognizing all the times you must not shoot. Knowing the legal lines and having the discipline to stay behind them, even when adrenaline is pumping.
Okay, let's move from the legal minefield to the practical side. Inside the range, during the training itself, the manual is blunt about what causes most firearm accidents.
Yeah. No surprise here. Negligence. It's almost always human error. Failure to follow the basic safety rules. Not usually the gun's fault.
So the responsibility is squarely on the shooter.
100%.
Let's list those core safety rules again, the absolute non-negotiables.
Okay, the big ones. Rule 1. Treat every firearm as if it is loaded. Always. No exceptions, even if you just checked it.
Right.
Rule 2. Always keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction, usually downrange or maybe at a 45-degree angle towards the ground when moving. And critically, keep your finger off the trigger and straight along the frame until your sights are on the target and you've decided to shoot.
Trigger discipline. Got it.
Rule 3. Never point a firearm at anything you are not willing to destroy. That includes people you don't intend to shoot.
Okay. And the fourth one involves constant checking.
Yes. Perform a safety check physically and visually.
Hmm.
Inspect the chamber, the magazine. Well, every time you pick up a firearm, every time you put it down, every time you hand it to someone or receive it from someone, build that habit. Redundancy prevents negligence.
Those are the general rules. What about off-duty? How do they have to store their firearm at home, especially if there are kids around?
There's a specific Florida statute on that, 790.174. If you keep a loaded firearm where you know, or reasonably should know, that a minor under 16 could get access to it without permission,
Yeah.
you must secure it, either in a lockbox or container, or keep it in a location a reasonable person would consider secure, or use a trigger lock or similar locking device.
So just leaving it in a nightstand drawer if kids are in the house is a no-go.
Definitely a no-go, unless the law says you're carrying it on your person or it's so close it's effectively under your immediate control. But unsecured storage with minors present, that's illegal and incredibly unsafe.
Okay. Let's talk about actually shooting well, marksmanship. The manual breaks it down into 6 fundamentals.
Yep. The 6 core skills for accurate shooting. You've got grip, sight alignment, sight picture, breath control, trigger control, and follow-through.
And instructors often say one of those is way harder to master than the others. Which one causes the most problems?
Oh, easily. Trigger control. It's cited over and over as the most difficult fundamental and the reason most shots miss.
Why is it so hard?
It's that mind-muscle connection. As you're consciously deciding, okay, press the trigger now, your body almost instinctively anticipates the bang and the recoil.
The flinch.
The flinch, or a jerk. Instead of a smooth, steady, straight back press, you snatch at the trigger. And that tiny movement, right as the bullet leaves the barrel, is enough to throw the shot way off target.
Makes sense. It requires real conscious effort to overcome that. Now, sight alignment versus sight picture. People mix those up. Can you clarify?
Sure. Sight alignment is just the relationship between your eye and the gun sights. Getting the front sight perfectly centered in the rear sight notch with the tops level.
Yeah.
It's purely mechanical, has nothing to do with the target yet.
Okay. Just sights and eye.
Right. Sight pictures when you take that perfect sight alignment and place it onto the target where you want the bullet to hit.
And the key here is where your eye should focus.
Absolutely critical. Your eye needs to be focused razor sharp on the front sight.
Not the target.
No. If your front sight is crystal clear, the target itself will actually look a little blurry, and so will the rear sight. But that's correct. Focusing on the front sight ensures the barrel is truly aligned for the shot. If you focus on the target, your sight alignment will drift.
Front sight focus. Got it. The training also covers using the environment, right? Cover versus concealment. Big difference.
Huge difference. Life and death difference. Cover stops bullets.
All right.
Think thick concrete walls, the engine block of a car, maybe a large tree trunk. It offers actual ballistic protection.
Okay. And concealment.
Concealment just hides you. It breaks the line of sight, but it won't stop bullets.
Yeah.
Think bushes, drywall, a standard wooden door, shadows. It hides you, but offers zero protection if someone shoots at your position.
So always choose cover over concealment, if possible.
Always. And the manual adds a safety point about using cover, like a barricade. Don't rest your gun or your hands directly on the cover material itself.
Why not?
Keep them slightly back. If a bullet hits the barricade near your hands or gun, the ricochet, bullet fragments, or pieces of the barricade material itself could splash back and injure you. Keep behind that edge.
Good tip. Okay, back to potential problems. We talked about negligence causing accidents. What about the most dangerous mechanical failure someone might face? The squib load.
Yeah, the squib load is really dangerous. It can destroy the gun and seriously hurt the shooter or bystanders.
What exactly happens in a squib?
The primer in the cartridge ignites, but the gunpowder inside either fails to light or only burns partially. So there's just enough force to push the bullet out of the casing, but not enough to push it all the way down the barrel. It gets stuck.
But lodged in the barrel. How would you know it happened? What are the signs?
The sound is the big giveaway. Instead of loud bang, you hear a quiet, muffled pop or puff, and you'll feel noticeably less recoil than normal. Much less.
So if you hear that pop and feel less recoil, what's the absolute immediate action?
Stop shooting. Immediately. Keep the muzzle pointed safely downrange. Do not try to fire another round. That's called shooting the obstruction, and it will likely cause the barrel to bulge or burst. Catastrophic failure.
So stop, keep it pointed safely, then what? On the range.
On the range, standard procedure is usually to raise your support hand, signal the instructor, let them handle clearing it safely.
And what if this happened, God forbid, in a real self-defense shooting?
You wouldn't have time to safely clear it. The immediate action drill would be recognize the squib, Transition immediately to a backup weapon if you have one, or get to cover and try to clear it if that's your only option. But firing again is absolutely out.
Okay. Now for more common malfunctions, especially in semi-auto pistols, things like failure to feed or the classic stovepipe. There are standard drills, right? Phase 1.
Right. The immediate action drill, phase 1, is the go-to for most common stoppages. It's tap, rack, ready, fire.
Break that down.
Tap. Slap the bottom of the magazine forcefully with the palm of your support hand. Ensures it's fully seated.
Okay.
Rack. Aggressively pull the slide all the way back and let it snap forward. This should eject the bad round or clear the stoppage and chamber a fresh round.
Right.
Ready. Reacquire your grip and sight picture. Fire. If the threat still exists, press the trigger. This drill fixes the vast majority, maybe 80–90% of common semi-auto issues very quickly.
And if tap, rack, ready doesn't work, that suggests something more serious. Phase 2.
Yeah, if phase 1 fails, you might have a more complex malfunction, often what's called a double feed. That's where you have a spent casing trying to get out and a live round trying to get in, jamming everything up.
Sounds bad. How do you clear that?
It's a more involved process. Phase 2 involves lock the slide open to the rear, strip or rip the magazine out of the gun, might be stuck, cycle the slide back and forth several times vigorously to shake out whatever is jamming the chamber and ejection port. Insert a fresh magazine, pull the slide all the way back and release it the slingshot method to chamber a new round, then ready and fire if needed.
That sounds like it takes much longer.
It does, significantly longer. The training emphasizes you only go to phase 2 if phase 1 fails, and you have the time and cover to do it safely. In a fight, if phase 1 fails, transitioning to a backup might be faster.
Okay, let's talk about the actual test itself. The handgun qualification course of fire. We know it's 144 rounds total, and you need that 70% minimum score. What does that 70% actually mean in terms of points?
Right, 70% translates to needing a minimum score of 168 points out of a possible 240.
And how are those points awarded? Where do you have to hit the target?
They use a standard silhouette target with scoring rings. A hit in the innermost ring, the 8 ring, gets you 5 points. Hit the next ring out, the 7 ring, that's 4 points. And any hit just on the silhouette itself, outside those rings, still gets you 3 points.
So accuracy counts, but just hitting the target still gets you something. Keeps you in the game.
Exactly. The goal is obviously good center hits, but every round on the silhouette contributes to reaching that minimum 168 threshold. Missing the silhouette entirely gets you 0 for that shot.
How does the course itself try to ramp up the pressure? Does it change distances or add challenges?
Oh yeah, it's designed to test skills under different kinds of pressure. It progresses systematically. Stages 1 and 2 are shot at very close range, just 3 yards.
3 yards? That's almost point blank. What's the focus there? Speed.
Speed? Yes, drawing quickly from the holster, getting shots on target fast, and also engaging multiple targets. They often have you shoot 1 round on a left target, 1 on a right target, back and forth. Simulates dealing with more than one threat.
And isn't there some really challenging shooting involved at that close range too, like one-handed?
Absolutely. That's a mandatory part. At 3 yards, you have to fire 3 rounds using only your strong hand. Then reholster, draw, and fire 3 rounds using only your support hand, your weak hand.
Wow. With only one hand on the gun.
Yep, and you only have 20 seconds for each of those 3-round strings. It really tests your ability to control the weapon if one arm is injured or maybe busy fending someone off.
Okay, that sounds tough. What happens as the course moves farther back, say 7 yards, then 15?
7 yards is sort of intermediate distance. Here they test things like shooting multiple rounds quickly, maybe 2 rounds in 5 seconds, and performing speed reloads under time pressure.
Still focused on speed and control.
Right. But the real test of pure marksmanship comes at 15 yards. Stages 5 and 6 are back there.
What do they do at 15 yards?
Longer strings of fire, requiring more precision. For example, firing 6 rounds, doing a mandatory reload, then firing another 6 rounds, all within 40 seconds.
Okay, 12 shots with a reload in 40 seconds at 15 yards. That requires focus.
It does. And then there are shorter strings, too, like 3 rounds in 10 seconds, repeated. At 15 yards, any flaws in your fundamentals, grip, trigger control, sight picture really show up. Speed is still a factor, but accuracy is paramount, or you'll bleed points fast.
You mentioned mandatory reloads. Is there a specific way they have to do the reload during the qualification?
Yes, the manual is specific here. For the qualification drills, any required reload must be a standard 2-handed controlled reload.
Not the emergency one-handed type reloads they might also teach.
Correct. Those one-handed or survival reloads are taught for information, for emergencies. But on the test, they want to see you perform a smooth, efficient, 2-handed reload under pressure. They're testing controlled proficiency.
Okay, that covers the handgun. But officers can also qualify for shotguns or rifles, right? What's involved there? Let's start with the shotgun.
Right. First off, you have to pass that 28-hour handgun course before you can even attempt the shotgun or rifle quals. It's a prerequisite.
Makes sense. So the shotgun course, annual, how long, how many rounds?
It's an annual 4-hour requalification course. Requires firing 24 rounds total.
What kind of ammo? Slugs? Buckshot?
Mandatory is #00 buckshot double-aught buck, the kind that typically has 9 pellets per shell.
9 pellets. So scoring isn't based on shooting your ring anymore.
No, it shifts to pellet count. With 24 rounds and 9 pellets per round, that's a possible 216 pellet hits on the target.
Okay.
To pass, you need to get a minimum of 70% of the total pellets on target. So 70% of 216, doing the math. That's about 151 hits needed.
Wait, let me recheck the source. The source says 72 possible pellets needing 50 hits minimum, 70%. Let's stick with that. 50 pellet hits minimum out of 72 possible.
Okay, 50 pellet hits minimum. And what kind of drills? Mostly focused on basic handling. Moving from a ready position to a shouldered firing position, engaging the target, and also shooting from behind cover. All done at 15 yards.
Got it. And finally, the semi-automatic rifle or carbine course, similar deal, annual, 4 hours.
Yep, annual 4 hours. But this one requires more ammo. 90 rounds total.
Yeah.
Usually done in 3 30-round cycles, matching a standard rifle magazine capacity.
And qualification, still 70%.
Still 70%. Scoring is back to points, likely similar to the handgun target. Out of a possible 150 points, you need 105 to pass.
The rifle drills sound like they cover more ground, literally. Different positions, different distances.
Oh yeah, much more dynamic.
Mm.
They require shooting from standing, kneeling, and prone positions.
What are the distances?
They vary quite a bit. You shoot from way back at 75 feet, then closer at 50 feet, then 30 feet, and then right up close, a close quarter stage at just 14 feet.
Wow, 14 feet with a rifle. What's the focus there?
Speed, transitions, and handling the rifle effectively in tight spaces. That close stage often involves firing multiple shots very quickly, maybe 12 rounds, with a mandatory speed reload, all within about 20 seconds. It really pushes weapon manipulation, managing recoil, and maintaining fundamental accuracy under high stress. #outro.
Wow. Okay, so after diving into this Class G training manual, it's definitely clear this is far beyond just a basic gun safety course.
Absolutely. It's exhaustive, it's mandatory, the standards are high, and it's directly modeled on how Florida trains its own law enforcement recruits.
Yeah, we've seen everything from the specific limits on calibers and ammo, no reloads for duty, that rigorous 144-round shooting test they have to pass every single year.
And maybe even more importantly, we really dug into the legal side, that razor's edge of liability.
Right, having to know the difference between civil and criminal responsibility, understanding exactly when deadly force is justified, which means knowing that list of forcible felonies cold.
Yeah, and those case studies really brought it home. How one wrong assessment, one failure to recognize that a threat has changed or de-escalated.
Like going from aggravated assault down to simple battery.
Exactly. That split-second misread can turn what might have been a justified action into a criminal charge or a massive lawsuit.
So when you put it all together, the takeaway seems pretty profound. They get this excellent LE standard training.
Yep.
But their actual legal authority to use force is still just that of a private citizen.
That's the crux of it.
So that high-level training, it's basically the only thing giving them a fighting chance to navigate a deadly force situation correctly, legally, without ending up fired, sued, or in jail.
It is. The whole system relies on that training creating the necessary judgment and restraint, because they don't have the same legal buffers as sworn officers.
So what does this really mean then for us, for the public, for the officers themselves? When we see that armed private security guard,
Well, I think it means the expectation is, and has to be, incredibly high. We expect that their training was sufficient, that they can make those perfect legal calls under immense stress, precisely because they lack the broader legal authority of the police. It all comes down to their individual performance and judgment in that moment.
which leaves us with kind of a chilling final thought, doesn't it? The law draws this incredibly fine line. You can't shoot the guy who just punched you, even if he might do it again. But you might be justified shooting the guy who credibly threatens to shoot you, even if he hasn't touched you yet.
Right, or the fleeing suspect distinction. You just saw them commit a terrible crime, but if they're running away and no longer an imminent threat,
Hmm.
you have to let them go, essentially. Your priority shifts from apprehension back to just immediate self-preservation or protecting others from that imminent danger.
So, in the chaos of a real event, flashing lights, screaming, adrenaline dumping. The officer has to make that life-altering legal calculation. And if they get it wrong, if they shoot that fleeing car or mistake simple battery for deadly assault, what is the true measure of reasonable belief? When the difference between being justified and being charged is maybe just a fraction of a second and a subtle interpretation of intent.
That's the question, isn't it?
Eh,
A terrifyingly thin line indeed.